Hello, fellow players of Hero Wars. I'm Jay. Welcome to Jay vs. Hero Wars. Today, I'll be putting a spotlight on the hero Corvus. Going to be covering kind of his background, potentially some ways you should potentially go about organizing your upgrades for him, as well as looking at some heroes Corvus is strong against and some potential weaknesses he may have that you should probably try to avoid. I'll also be going over different potential synergetic heroes that work really well with Corvus, potentially for you to build a team around. So with that being said, let's get right into the video. Alright guys, so here we are in game. We are talking about Corvus. So let's go right to him. So here's Corvus. Corvus, right? One of the coolest heroes in terms of the fact that he is the only hero who has passed away that we know of, like entirely passed away. He died. He was resurrected by his daughter, right? And he is sworn to protect the kingdom of Graven. And that's also why, if you look at his skins here, his default, right, he does have a crown, and that is because he is dubbed the King of the Undead. Anyway, so there's that. A couple of notes here, right? His daughter is Morrigan, who brought him back. That is also a hero he should obviously be paired with. One of the best combos you could have for the Undead squad. Now that we've established that he is, he has some background, he has some lore, we also have to look at the fact that he has some pretty decent skills. So let's break this down. So his first skill deals damage to the enemy front line, and it temporarily decreases all defenses. Now, this includes armor, magic defense, and dodge. So that's really key, especially looking at the popularity of dodge teams that have come into Hero Wars, right? Looking specifically at Yasmin. Corvus is a fantastic counter to Yasmin. I will get to counters in a second here. But right, this is one of the few heroes that he cannot miss on this, right? As soon as this first effect goes into battle, that will temporarily decrease the defense. So the more times he can spam that, the better. Unity of the Damned. Now this increases his allies' physical and magic attack. This is beneficial for all heroes, but especially Morgan, right? Going back to the fact that Morgan herself is a magic attacker, but her minions, right, the little guys that she summons to the field, are physical attackers. So this basically is the perfect skill to pair with Morgan. Altar of the Souls. Now this is really the key, I would say the most important skill that Corvus has, right? It's the altar that deals the most damage to specific opponents. And the Elder's health is directly proportional to how much damage your team takes. But still, though, the damage output that this altar deals is a spectacle to behold, and that is really the key here for Corvus. So really, I mean, if I were to do this again, obviously Altar of Souls needs to be maxed out. A Royal Defense, probably the lowest priority in terms of skills that need to be upgraded. This moves a ally who has lower than 20% health. Corvus moves them to the center of the team. Now, I've heard a lot of people say on mobile or Facebook or whatever platform you're on, I've heard a lot of players say that this is probably like the most useless skill that Corvus has. And I can see why people would say that. It doesn't serve a purpose like dealing a lot of damage, but it does actually have, in my opinion, a very distinct purpose when paired with a specific hero, that hero being Dorian. So Dorian, as a lot of us know, has vampirism himself, right? Let me pull up Dorian here. Dorian's right here. Now, Dorian has vampirism. So if he were the hero to get pulled in the middle, that would be the ideal situation. That would grant vampirism to multiple heroes nearby, because his fourth skill here, Initiation, increases vampirism of nearby allies. Now, what that means is vampirism is the state where if you deal an attack, you get a proportional amount of health in return. So that is why Kira is so popular with Dorian, but also Dorian works well with this undead combination of Corvus. Another aspect to consider here, right? So two ways that I could see Dorian being the hero that gets pulled in the middle. One specifically is Jorgen, right? Jorgen allows for teams to hit the very last hero, and typically Dorian's in that last spot. Another thing could be if you have Dorian on your team, uh, if he's in the lower third, right, the lowest three heroes on your team, Kark can actually hit Dorian and cause him to have less than 20% health, which would trigger Corvus's effect. Now, the other aspect here is that you could have a different hero get pulled to the center and also get an opportunity to still get the benefit of Dorian's vampirism. That's really why I think Royal Defense, right, this last skill is really catered to kind of, having people use Dorian on their team. So that's really kind of what I see the Royal Defense being the most useful for. Now, another thing I got to talk about here is glyphs and glyph order and upgrades. For me, I think it's pretty clear that he has very good offensive stats, but he's really soft on the defensive end. And so that's why, even though I'm going to focus on strength first, I would upgrade his strength stat first, probably then go to health generally, because this will upgrade his health regardless of whether it's a magic attacker or a physical attacker. So I would then focus on the health glyph second, followed by these two kind of at your own discretion, really. They're kind of like both equally important, armor and magic defense. It really depends more on how many of each opponent you face, whether it's an arena, grand arena, or Clash of Worlds, whatever it might be. You're going to want to have these stats also available. So it doesn't really matter which order, but I would say the lowest priority is going to be the physical attack glyph here. So the order I would go, again, is strength stat, which is the main stat. It will give you the most benefits in terms of upgrades, right? It'll increase multiple stats as opposed to just these other ones that only focus on, say, health, magic defense, armor, or physical attack. Physical attack is important, but it is probably the least important of the bunch. You want your tank to stay alive, and to do so, you're going to need health and the other stats such as armor and magic defense. So that is how I would approach Corvus for his glyphs. Now, looking at Corvus for his artifacts, right? How does Corvus play a part in that? Let's take a look. So his first artifact, right, grants us armor, which is super key for him because, again, he's not one of the tankiest guys. And that's also why I recommend typically, if you're going to have time to upgrade his artifacts as well, I would start with magic defense over armor right away because he does get armor granted to him through his first artifact skill. Here we have armor and magic defense for his second artifact, which I think is pretty key as well. And then you have Ring of Strength. The order here kind of doesn't entirely matter, but if I were to do this, I would probably focus on getting this first artifact up to about level 50, and I would get this one to about level 40, and then I'd probably get it, semi-close. And this one can lag a little bit behind the other two, in my opinion, because that will give you more defensive stats, which you're going to need to get your Corvus to survive early on. Once he's established, it's a little bit different, but to get him started, that's how I would approach it. So that is Corvus from a snapshot glance. Now, let me pop over in some visuals here. Here we have heroes that Corvus counters. So, for instance, here I have Kira, Yasmin, Orion, Celeste, Ginger, Artemis, Galahad, Leanne, and Helios. So all of these heroes get countered by Corvus. I did put some asterisks here, and that will be pretty evident why after I explain some of Corvus's weaknesses. But generally speaking, Corvus is great against Kira, Orion, and Yasmin, mainly because of the altar, right? It really targets those heroes. Same could be said here for Artemis and a couple other of these guys. He also just tends to weaken heroes like Galahad, right, with his ability to lower defense of those frontline heroes. So for all those reasons, Corvus is pretty dang good if you're facing an opponent team that has these heroes. Now let me get into the weaknesses, and this will also explain why these asterisks. And here is why. So Corvus is obviously a very good hero, and he does straight up attack heroes like Kira, But the problem with this is it's kind of a double-edged sword, and that is every time a hero loses health, energy is gained. So when that happens, a hero like Kira gains a lot of energy really fast but loses a lot of health. Now, what that means is she can activate her ult, and typically that's not a big deal, but if she is near Dorian, who grants vampirism, that can be very problematic. If Kira is able to spam multiple times, she pretty much heals herself instantly to full health with Dorian's vampirism, and is then able to continue to attack, essentially annihilating your team. So just be careful when Iris or Kira are next to Dorian. Dorian is kind of a problem for really a lot of teams, but especially against Corvus, who tends to deal high damage. Now, this doesn't come into play when you have another hero like Yasmin near Dorian, mainly because Yasmin continues to switch sides, and she doesn't take advantage fully of Dorian's vampirism. Other heroes that Corvus is weak against include Kark. His altar doesn't target Kark. Faceless, right, because of the reason that Faceless stuns and pushes away an enemy. That stun stunts Corvus' ability to attack. We also have Tristan on here, Ching Mao, who's a very popular hero to use, Sebastian, who nullifies that lowering of stats, Dante, Ishmael, and Rufus. So those are all heroes that you should probably try to avoid using Corvus against if at all possible. Now let's wrap this up with who Corvus is synergetic with. For obvious reasons, Corvus is synergetic with the undead heroes. Now that includes Morgan, Dorian, Kira, and Phobos. So those are the main heroes that are undead. Dorian, I'm classifying him as undead even if he isn't quite technically undead. He falls in the realm. He's not really alive or dead, so he's a vampire. So he's right in that middle. Anyway, Dorian, right, is one of those heroes I actually really like in a Corvus and Morgan team, which is why I have him pictured here. Morgan, though, in my opinion, is a must. Other heroes that work well, obviously, are Fafnir, Sebastian, and Jet. Those are all really good supports, pretty much for any team. Envari, again, pretty versatile tank potential. You could also use Envari's arch nemesis, Kark, who is a offensive fiend. Kark, right, being one of the most offensive heroes. Pairing that with Corvus makes for a very offensive heavy team, which could be very good if you're an attacker. Cornelius makes for a very balanced team, but he isn't quite someone I would highly recommend. He's still very usable though with Corvus. Now with that quick overview of Corvus, I hope it helps you guys out a little bit with how to potentially use him, how you could potentially maximize his capabilities, and cater him to your team. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please, if you don't mind, hit that like button and subscribe. And with that being said, I look forward to seeing you guys very soon in Dominion.